Hi, welcome to Rev'd Up for Sunday, a lectionary podcast from the clergy of St. Mark's Episcopal Church in New Canaan, Connecticut. I'm Justin Crisp.
I'm Peter Walsh.
And we are, again, without our colleague, Reverend Elizabeth. She's enjoying some summer Sabbath here, and if you're watching this in the vicinity of its recording in August 2022, we hope that you're getting some summer Sabbath too. And speaking of Sabbaths, we've got a controversial Sabbath right here in our lesson today from Luke chapter 13. Let's hear the story. A reading from the Gospel according to St. Luke, the 13th chapter, beginning at the 10th verse. Now Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath, and just then there appeared a woman with a spirit that had crippled her for 18 years. She was bent over and was quite unable to stand up straight. When Jesus saw her, he called her over and said, "Woman, you are set free from your ailment." When he laid his hands on her, immediately she stood up straight and began praising God. But the leader of the synagogue, indignant because Jesus had cured on the Sabbath, kept saying to the crowd, "There are 6 days on which work ought to be done. Come on those days and be cured, but not on the Sabbath day." But the Lord answered him and said, "You hypocrites! Does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or his donkey from the manger and lead it away to give it water? And ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan bound for 18 long years, be set free from this bondage on the Sabbath day?" When he said this, all his opponents were put to shame, and the entire crowd was rejoicing at all the wonderful things that he was doing. This is the gospel of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Really interesting story.
Great story. Great story. This is a story that appears only in Luke.
Right.
There are echoes of this story in Jesus' healings and exorcisms in some of the other Gospels, but this one has its own particularity. So just to make sure everybody's set in the place of Jesus here, Jesus again we're on the travel log. Jesus is moving, as you said, from sort of end of chapter 9 to end of chapter 19, the 10 chapter journey that we are all on, primarily a teaching journey. And he is now in a synagogue. In fact, this is the last time we're going to see Jesus in a synagogue as he makes his way to Jerusalem. He's about 6 months away from being in Jerusalem at this point, as far as we're going to date this very roughly. And here we have him once again on the Sabbath. And I know you would start in the same place, so I'm going to start in that place too. But let's just go back to Jesus when he began his ministry back in Nazareth, and as you remember, as he went from his 40 days in the Judean wilderness, and where the Satan had driven him there, and as he came out of there, he goes home. And in Nazareth, he does the same thing. He goes on the holy day and picks up that scroll of Isaiah and then sits down, of course, because teachers sit there, and he reads from that scroll, and he read this: "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, and to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And then he closes up his New Annotated Oxford Bible, and that in some sense sets what Jesus is about here, because he's about the business of setting this woman free. And just to go a little bit deeper into this and then let you take over here. Yeah. So where it says, and then there appeared a woman, the Greek there is it's behold. I mean, this would make an incredible movie scene, behold. And as the woman comes in, we're told that she's 18 years bent over. And I'm not talking, this is likely not a slight hunch, because it didn't do enough Supermans to keep her back muscles. Right? This woman is crippled and probably bent literally in half. And we're told that she's crippled with a spirit that has crippled her. So now we have the demonic and we have the physical coming together in crippling this woman. And what does he do? But he sets her free from her ailment, just like he said he was going to do at the beginning of his mission.
Yeah. I love that you're tying these two synagogue Sabbath moments together, because this is Jesus fulfilling what he said he was doing.
Yeah.
There at the beginning of Luke, he's in the midst of unfurling the way in which he is a fulfillment of the prophecy he was preaching in Nazareth. He was preaching in Nazareth that he was the fulfillment of it. Here's the fulfillment. The fulfillment lasts for his whole life, his death, his resurrection, all that. We're catching him in the middle of it. We're in media res, as it were. So he's the liberation that he proclaims earlier in Luke is one which is cosmic in its significance, as in it goes all the way down, right? It is personal, it is physical, it is spiritual, it is societal, social, political, the whole thing. And Jesus' watchword is liberation. His watchword is freedom. And that's what this is. It's a story of freedom from bondage, right? Which is not necessarily the way that we would automatically, or I'll say it's not the only way that we might think of an illness or a sickness or a physical ailment of this kind, right? Jesus interprets this as interprets it that she's in bondage to Satan in particular, which we can say a word about in a moment. But this is something from which she needs to be set free. He interprets the healing as liberation, right? Which is another way in which those two synagogue moments are helpful in interpreting each other. I just want to fill out a little bit, because I found this really interesting in one of the commentaries I read by Carolyn Sharp, who's a preaching professor, a scholar of the Hebrew Bible at Yale Divinity School. I found it really interesting the way that Professor Sharp filled out what this woman's physical ailment likely was and what it would have caused her. So if this woman had been bent over in the way that's described here for this period of 18 years, Professor Sharp speculates she would have experienced, she would be experiencing in this moment neck and back pain, fatigue, difficulty breathing, heart problems related to the inflammation of her aorta, right? And then also, this is in addition to, she says, psychological feelings of frustration, vulnerability, and isolation, right? This is causing her cardiac problems as well as back problems, right? This is not just painful, it could, in the long run, kill her, right? Not gonna kill her right now, but in the long run, it's gonna kill her. And that's actually important, because the debate that they're having in the synagogue is about whether or not this counts as work. And Professor Sharp says a word about that too. If we go back all the way to the Hebrew Bible, if we go back to Exodus chapter 20 in the Ten Commandments and the Decalogue, there's this, one of the commandments is to keep the Sabbath day holy. And it does this because it says that in creation, God rested on the seventh day, and so hallowed it, made it holy, and so now all of God's people are also going to rest on the seventh day and not do any work. The trouble was that in Exodus chapter 20, for instance, and the commandment occurs multiple times, but in Exodus 20, just for example, it says, 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son nor daughter, nor your servants, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your town, etc. So nobody to whom Israel is connected is supposed to work. But it doesn't define what work is. And so that's where the rabbinic teaching came in. And by this time, Professor Sharp says, rabbinic teaching had consensus around you could make a life-saving intervention for somebody if it was particularly urgent. That wouldn't count as work. The dispute here is about whether or not this is life-threatening enough.
Right.
And that's where you get Jesus saying, well, does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or donkey from the manger and lead it away to give it water? Why ought not we do this for this woman, right? So he seems to be, he's saying, if it serves life, it would not be a violation of the Sabbath. It doesn't have to be like this person has to be dying of this thing like right then in the next 24 hours or something like that. If it serves life, if you're leading the animal to water, that then it would be acceptable to perform on the Sabbath. That's in the context of the rabbinic debate. I think that's part of what's going on. What do you make of the law, the life, the donkey, all of that stuff?
I'm with you on this. That this is not Jesus taking the law out and saying, "Oh, that's a ridiculous law. It's a ridiculous commandment." At all. This is interpretation of the law, and he does perfect Hebraic argumentation, right? We allow this, but why not this, right? This kind of parallelism, and the question is loosing. You loose whatever binds your donkey or your ox, so that the donkey or the ox can go get something to water. And now this woman is in bondage. So the whole question is, what's the demon doing? This woman, the bondage is holding her in bondage, and so he's simply loosing. So now we get Jesus interpreting the demonic work is like the rope around the ox's neck. I mean, this really gets into some great stuff in here. And then he Jesus, I mean, he goes for it when he calls her a daughter of Abraham. We get who do we get son of Abraham with? Isn't that like Zacchaeus or something like that? And he comes with the daughter of Abraham and just really loads it up. But it's just set free from this bondage on the Sabbath day. So that we've already agreed upon this. So this is sort of like, this is where we get, we talk about the scribes and the Pharisees and the lawyers in the New Testament time, and this is the sort of stuff that they would be sorting out.
Yeah.
Right. And so Jesus, in my opinion, was not a carpenter. He was a rabbi.
Yeah.
I mean, he came from carpenter stock, and I'm sure he made a great table. Yeah. But really, what he's all about is his incredible knowledge of the law, and then he's interpreting. So he's playing law. But the best part about this, no, not the best part. The incredible part about this is what's tucked in between, where we get the leader of the synagogue is indignant. So the leader of the synagogue, the way that comes out in the Greek is, this is not the rabbi, this is like the chief administrator. Okay, so we have the chief administrator of the synagogue, and he's indignant, and so instead of talking to Jesus, he keeps saying to the crowd, so this is the ultimate, he uses the crowd in a triangulation, and he goes on, there's 6 days on which to work ought to be done, come on those days and be cured, but not on the Sabbath day. So he's concerned about the crowd, and he cares not one iota for the woman who's bent over in all this tremendous pain. And I mean, I'm sure that many of you who are tuning into the pod have seen somebody who's bent like this. It looks terrifyingly terrible. Yeah. Terrifying. I mean, you can only see people's feet. You see people craning their neck up just to see right at someone's belt level. But the conversation is also, it's makes for a great scene.
You're totally right. The triangulation there with the crowd, that is really good. It is like something out of Shakespeare. I think that it's important to note that this is a good word for Christians, right? So there could be a kind of supersessionist or even anti-Semitic Christian temptation, anti-Jewish Christian temptation to say that now, okay, since Christians are free of the law, as it were, we are all good and we don't have to worry about this kind of back and forth. I actually think this is a back and forth that all of our churches have all of the time. This is a word for Christians. Which of our rituals, which of our traditions, which of our the forms with which we live and which give us life, which of them are serving life and which of them are taking life away? And I'm a conservative of a particular kind, in the sense that I really believe in tradition, right? It's one of the reasons why I love being an Anglican, an Episcopalian, is because we do honor tradition, right? We have forms. I mean, we have a prayer book which tells us what to say in 9.5 out of 10 sort of things which a pastor or a priest could be.
The Holy Bible. I pulled out.
Oh, yeah, you got to pick out the other red book. This is a very Episcopal moment, right? You ask for the Book of Common Prayer and you get a Bible, and you get a BCP instead. We have forms. forms, right? And these forms a life in form can give you great life. It can give your life structure. I think of the music of Mozart, of which I'm particularly enamored right now. Mozart was somebody who didn't experiment. I'm going to be corrected by a musicologist in the comments, but to my knowledge, as an amateur, Mozart didn't experiment a great deal with form, right? He's not somebody who like blows up whole genres of stuff and does something completely new. But what he does is he makes the most exquisite music, arguably the most exquisite music of the classical period, arguably the most exquisite music of Western, in the Western canon up until the 20th century or something like that. For some people, maybe including the 20th and the 21st century. Beautiful music, but not exploding everything, right? So you can make beautiful things and not explode everything, but sometimes they have to be exploded. Sometimes you've got to shift things, you have to change things, you have to give up tradition, and discerning what to let go and what to keep, what to bind and what to loose in rabbinic vocabulary is what Jesus is about here. But I do want to take a moment to talk about the fact that this woman is not bound just by a law. She's not just inhibited by Sabbath regulations or something like that. Jesus says she's bound by Satan. You have a lot to say about the spiritual world and the spiritual life. What do you make of that?
Okay, so we're now entering into a territory that is, to my mind, one of the most difficult areas for us to speak of with great authority. I think that statements about this reality are statements that are sketched from experience with great humility, and not statements that are made with super clarity about what we're talking about here. Back to the Book of Common Prayer and back to the Bible I pulled out, both of them bear witness to a spiritual world that has bad stuff in it. And we've talked about this in the past, in our baptismal liturgies, we speak about renunciations, the renunciation of Satan and the spiritual forces, the renunciation of evil, and then the renunciation of sin. And we would hold that, and certainly as we put the two red books together, the Bible and the Book of Common Prayer, we have that there is a force in the world whose job it is to resist God and destroy the creatures of God. And so what we have here is a story about the destruction of a creature of God. Nowhere in this story do we hear anything that there's been any sin from, sin of a previous generation visited upon her, or that she has been a sin, that it is almost as though she pull the wrong card, was one of the unlucky people to be caught up in the fallen world, which includes dark forces, which have made her almost like a beast of burden, bent over like a beast of burden. And so Jesus, now we introduce Jesus, who is a spiritual healer, who approaches the physical world. We go to the hospital and we approach it through the physical world. Jesus approaches the physical world through the spiritual, the lens of the spiritual, the arts of light. I'm thinking of Hogwarts and the dark arts. So Jesus is a master of the light arts, right? And he cures her orthopedic problem with the spiritual command. And so we then see that Jesus has this power. I mean, exorcisms are very common for Jesus. And then we, as a church, as a people of Jesus followers, let me talk about that. Jesus followers are trained and taught, and some are sent out to continue the work of the Spirit, Jesus' Spirit. And so when we have people that come to us and speak of the dark spirits in their lives, some of which their crippling might not be, they are literally orthopedically bent, but you have seen these people come and they look like a ghost. They're as pale as, they're that deathly kind of green pale, that super, super pale that, and so we find that when people have this ailment, that the ailment is like taking someone's energetic bucket and sticking a big hole in the bottom of it, and it drains the psychic energy, the chi, the life force, the grace out of their lives, and they find themselves unable to function fully. And so when, as part of a healing modality, we may lay hands on a person, just as Jesus laying hands on somebody, and our prayer is not that this person is cured through our energy, and because we don't have that sort of energy, but it is in the name of Jesus, which is clear in the Acts of the Apostles, also written by Luke the physician, or compiled by Luke the physician, at least in our tradition, and handed to those. So in the name of Jesus, to call in the power of the Spirit, the living Christ may be able to cauterize the wound, or to exorcise, to help that person to have that spirit leave their body and to cauterize the wound, such that the made in the image of God life force that this person have might fill up the bucket of life, and in filling up natural energetic energy, chi, that thing, by the grace of God, their body might be able to heal. And when these are things that often take place over a protracted amount of time, but sometimes, actually kind of relatively quickly too. But in Jesus's stories, it's always instantaneous, right? The guy, and they drop the mat on the floor, and Jesus says, "Your sins are forgiven, stand up and walk out of here." Now, the rest of us don't have, that's like the bullion cube of Jesus, and the rest of us are put into the pool of humanity, and that bullion cube doesn't have the same intensity. So that what we see here as a paradigm and a model, one of the gifts to the church in its holiness is to be able to continue to do some of this work some of the time, but not all the time, because we just know that, right? We just know that the experience is we can do the best we can do, but we do not have the ability to manipulate the spiritual world as we desire it all the time.
Yeah.
We just don't. We don't.
That's a very, very, very good word. I'm really grateful for that. And I've learned a great deal from you about this. It does. I think you had it totally right at the very beginning. We have to be very, very, very humble whenever we wade into this territory, right? I think that one additional thing that I might add is that there's I would draw a contrast between this healing narrative and some of the others in the Gospels. So here you have a healing, which is a healing of an ailment, which Jesus identifies with some kind of demonic bondage, right? The spiritual forces of wickedness which rebel against God, or those which corrupt and destroy the creatures of God, to quote the prayer book's baptismal service. There are other healings, like the healing of the man who's born blind in John chapter 9, where there's a conversation that Jesus intervenes in, where people are asking Jesus who sinned, this man or his parents, right? Is this a sin problem?
Yeah.
And Jesus says neither that it's a sin problem, nor that it's the spiritual forces of wickedness which rebel against God. Rather, he says in this case, Jesus answered, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's works might be revealed in him."
Oh, I forgot that.
It's an incredibly complicated sentence in the Greek, right? There's a debate about this conjunction, which is translated "so that." It basically, that he was born blind is not actually in the Greek, right? It's to make the conjunction make sense for English speakers. It basically goes, neither this man nor his parents sinned. Hina is the Greek, the so that God's works might be revealed in him, and this so that can either communicate purpose, or it can be a command. That is, it could either be that this happened so that God's works can be revealed, or it could be neither this man nor his parents sinned, full stop, let God's works. May God's works be revealed in him. The NRSV translates this so that, and I have to say I follow the so that, because I think this is in a different category than the healing that we just got, that we've been looking at in Luke. That there are, and I say this from my experience as a pastor. I assume that people are the authority on their own lives. And I'm writing a book right now. I worked on it some this summer while I was away, about which is talking to pastors and talking to people about how God is at work in their lives. And my main, I want to speak to everybody, but my main intervention for pastors is that pastors ought to be a lot more humble than we normally are. I think many pastors, many seminarians, myself included, when I first became a priest, walk into a room or into a hospital room or into your office or whatever to meet with somebody, and they already have an idea about how God's at work. Either God made this happen or God didn't make this happen. Whatever. We come to it with our own assumptions. And what I'm suggesting is actually that we take a back seat and we listen. And we help people to discern the spirits, right? In the spirit of somebody like St. Ignatius of Loyola, that we help people, we serve as, pastors can serve as spiritual directors to help people to figure out, is this more like John 9 or is this more like Luke 13? Is this are these the spiritual forces of wickedness which are not God? Right? They are not God. God says no to this stuff. And a lot to say about that no, maybe in my sermon. God says no, that's it. There's no affirmation of these spiritual forces of wickedness. God has nothing to do with them. God defeats them, but God is not like underwriting what they're doing, right? Jesus is fighting this thing, fighting this something which is nothing. Anyway, more to say about that another time. Are these the spiritual forces of wickedness, or is this something where, like, in some incredibly mysterious way, which we do not understand, this is intended by God so that God's works can be revealed? And we've had, the three of us, Elizabeth here, really central to this. I'm sorry that she's not here to speak to it. We've had experiences just very recently in the lives of multiple people this summer, both of whom spoke about what happened to them in the category of John 9 rather than Luke 13. So these were two women in particular, one who was a bit older but still incredibly young, to have died incredibly young. The other who was very young, she was only 29. They both had cancer. They both had forms of cancer, and they spoke about their illnesses in terms of God having intended them in some way. They spoke very powerfully about how God intended their cancer, intended their illnesses, even the second one, intended her, the 29-year-old, intended her dying for some greater purpose, which they did not know, but that they were assured that this was a part of God's plan. And I have to say, I stay very humble in front of that kind of thing. I think that in the scriptures there are two different categories of illness, right? You've got Luke chapter 13, and you've got John 9, and these were two people who put their suffering in the category of John 9 in a really incredible, I would say, mysterious, and hope-filled, even though incredibly sad and tragic. It was a hope-filled way.
Yeah, both of those people there. This is the shocking thing about our vocation, is that we get to witness real people doing biblical things. And it's not people, look at the way we're dressed. We wear the same clothes every single day. Every day. Except I don't wear these on Saturday.
Yeah, not Saturday.
Or Monday. But anyway, but the real holy people aren't dressed like this. The real holy people are the people who have these life-threatening and life-ending illnesses. And they say things, they experience things that are like they're like, or maybe I should be picking this thing up, that the profundity of which makes you believe in God and makes you believe that there is a mystery of what it means to be alive and what it means to be contending with your own existence and what it means to experience your existence in communion with an unseen force that we call God. And when they come together, there's almost nothing to do but kneel in prayer. And the only response is wordless. There's nothing to say. I mean, I know you're going to preach a sermon tomorrow that's going to be riveting.
For one of these two people.
I can't wait. I hope you talk for a long time. Because you have a window. She has given you holy material for you to share with us.
Yeah.
And so you're right on about that. You're right on about that. I've been out of seminary for 30 years. I'm coming, and next Sunday is my 14th year here, of all bizarre things. And the more I do this, the less I have to say about a lot of things. I think I'm getting smaller. I mean, I am shrinking because I'm give me shrinking time. But I mean, my just like I do experience mysteries of holiness that are just.
There's almost nothing to do except that. You know, I've done multiple times. Shocked into speechlessness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I meditate every morning, and I meditate. I don't allow myself to get out of bed, because when I get out of bed, all hell breaks loose. I mean, life is wild. It's wild. It's crazy.
It's like the podcast from last week with the Moira Rose.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy. So I will meditate from 5 to 55 minutes every morning, and so I do the Maranatha is my, as you know, my mantra, and I do oftentimes the length of my backbone. I can Maranatha, which gets into a lot of Eastern things about the role of your backbone in your spiritual life, and it's why they tell you to either be upright or downright. But anyway, and to experience subterranean grace that changes people's lives and allows us to stay deeply rooted in the midst of the storm. It's like you're in the ocean, and the tumult on the surface is craziness. It's like this woman has bent over for 18 years. 18 years! You ever try to spend like 2 days bent over? It's terrifying. Your back is killing you. It's so painful. We would, in our contemporary culture, she'd be in palliative care.
Right.
Totally. But here, you know, the holiness of it. There's a holiness underneath it all.
Yeah.
It's just a holiness underneath it all. And it's just like the backbone of our world. And it just flows. But in Jesus, it's incarnate. And so he has the power to lay hands on it, say a word, bam.
Right. I have to say, real people doing biblical things. That is absolutely right. And one of the gifts that I'd say of being in this vocation is that you see real people do biblical things all the time. And you're constantly reminded it's really real. It's actually real. This stuff, actually real. We pray it be a blessing to you. Please like, share, and subscribe. Help us to share this blessing with the world in great need. God bless you. See you soon. Bye-bye.